Amara walked slowly along the muddy street, her small shoes almost breaking with every step. The bakery where she worked had just closed for the day, and she carried a small cloth bag with a loaf of bread inside. The night was cold, and the air smelled of rain. She pulled her old shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to hide from the wind. Her little house stood at the edge of the city, far away from bright lights and tall buildings. The roof leaked whenever it rained, and the wooden door creaked whenever it opened, but it was the only place she could call home. Amara had lived there alone since her parents passed away many years ago. She had learned to survive by working, long hours saving every coin and never giving up. Inside the house, the table was empty except for one candle. Amara placed the bread on the table, lit the candle, and sighed. She had hoped to bring home more food, maybe some soup or fruit, but her wages had been small that day. Still, she smiled faintly, reminding herself that tomorrow might be better. Amara was poor, but she carried a rich heart. Every time someone in the neighborhood needed help, she was the first to step forward. She often gave away bread to hungry children, even when she herself had little to eat. People sometimes told her she was too soft, too giving, but Amara believed. Kindness was the only thing that made life worth living. That evening, the sky grew darker than usual. The wind picked up and thunder rolled across the clouds. Amara closed the window quickly, afraid the storm would grow worse. She placed the bread in a cloth to keep it dry. Just as she was about to sit down, she heard a faint sound outside. At first, she thought it was the wind. But then she heard it again. Footsteps, uneven and hurried. Amara's heart beat faster. She rarely had visitors, and strangers hardly came this far at night. Carefully, she opened the door just a little and peeked out. What she saw made her forget her fear. Standing in the rain was a man holding the hand of a small boy. The man's clothes were soaked, his face tired, but his arm wrapped protectively around the boy's shoulders. The child looked pale and shivered. In the cold, they seemed lost, with no place to go. "Please," the man said softly, his voice rough from the weather. "We are looking for shelter. Our car broke down nearby and there was no inn open. Could we stay here, just for tonight?" Amara looked at her tiny house. It was barely enough for one person, let alone two more. The roof leaked, the floor was rough, and the food was not enough. Yet when she looked at the little boy, her heart softened. She could not let them wander in the storm. "Yes," she said, gently, opening the door wider. "You can come in. It is not much, but it is warm." The man and the boy stepped inside. Water dripped from their clothes onto the floor. Amara quickly found an old towel and handed it to them. "Here," she said. "Dry yourselves." The man smiled weakly. "Thank you. My name is Daniel. This is my son, Eli. We did not mean to trouble you." "You are not troubling me," Amara replied kindly. "Sit down. I will bring something warm." She placed the loaf of bread on the table and cut it into small slices. She poured water into cups and pushed the plate toward them. "Please eat," she said, though she knew it was not enough for 3 people. Daniel hesitated. He looked at the bread and then at Amara. "This is your food. We cannot take it." "You must," Amara said firmly. "The child needs it more than I do." Eli looked up at her with wide eyes. "Thank you," he whispered shyly. As they ate, Amara studied them quietly. Daniel's hands looked strong, but his eyes carried sadness. Eli's face was gentle and innocent, though tired from the long day. Something about them felt unusual, but she did not ask questions. It was not her way to demand answers from strangers. When they finished, Amara brought out a thin blanket. "Eli can sleep on my bed," she said softly. "It is small, but he will be warm." "What about you?" Daniel asked, surprised. "I can sleep on the floor," Amara said with a small smile. I have done it many times. Daniel wanted to refuse, but he saw her determination. He nodded slowly, touched by her generosity. That night, Amara sat by the candlelight, telling Eli a gentle story about stars and how they guided travelers home. The boy listened with bright eyes, slowly drifting into sleep. Daniel watched silently, his heart heavy with gratitude. He had met many people in life, but rarely had he seen such kindness from someone who had so little. When Eli finally slept, Amara blew out the candle and whispered, "Good night." Daniel whispered back, "Good night, and thank you." As the storm raged outside, the little house stood like a small island of warmth. Amara lay on the floor, her shawl wrapped tightly, her thoughts wandering. She did not know who these strangers truly were. She only knew they needed help, and helping them made her heart feel lighter. She closed her eyes, unaware that the man she had led into her humble home was no ordinary traveler. He was a man whose world was filled with wealth, power, and secrets. But tonight, in her small, broken house, none of that mattered. Tonight, he was simply a father, and she was simply a girl with a kind heart. And so the night passed, carrying within it the quiet beginning of a story neither of them could yet imagine. Morning came slowly, with soft light shining through the broken window of Amara's little house. The storm had passed, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and the sound of dripping water from the roof. Amara opened her eyes and stretched her arms. She had slept lightly on the floor, but her heart felt calm. She turned her head and saw Eli still sleeping on her bed, wrapped in the thin blanket. His small chest rose and fell gently, his face peaceful. Daniel was sitting nearby, awake, already watching his son with quiet care. When he noticed Amara had woken, he gave a polite nod. "Good morning," Daniel said softly. "Good morning," Amara replied, sitting up. "I hope you both rested well." Daniel smiled faintly. "Better than we expected. Thank you again. Without your kindness, we would have spent the night in the cold." Amara shook her head. It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same. But Daniel knew that was not true. In his life, he had met many people who turned away from strangers, even when they had much more to give than Amara did. He looked at the cracked walls of her home, the simple table, the empty shelves. She had almost nothing, and yet she had. Given them everything she had, Amara stood and went to the small clay stove in the corner. She boiled water and placed some tea leaves in it. The smell was light but comforting. She poured it into 2 cups, offering one to Daniel. "It is not strong," she said apologetically, "but it will warm you." Daniel accepted the cup gratefully. "It is perfect." Soon Eli woke up, rubbing his eyes. He looked around, confused for a moment, then remembered where he was. "Good morning," he said shyly. Amara smiled warmly at him. "Good morning, little one. Did you sleep well?" "Yes," Eli said, climbing down from the bed. His small feet touched the cold floor, and Amara quickly placed a mat under him so he would not shiver. Daniel watched her quietly, noticing how naturally she cared for his son, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. After they drank tea, Daniel explained a little more about their situation. "Our car broke down last evening. We tried to call for help, but the storm cut the signal. I thought there might be an inn or a small hotel nearby, but everything was closed. You were the only light we saw." Amara nodded, listening carefully. "The nearest inn is 2 miles away. It would have been too far in the storm. You made the right choice to stop here." Eli tugged on Amara's shawl. "Do you live here alone?" he asked curiously. "Yes," Amara answered with a gentle smile. "This is my home." "Don't you get scared at night?" the boy asked. Again. "Sometimes," Amara admitted honestly. "But I believe that even in the dark there is always a little light. That thought keeps me brave." Eli looked at her with admiration, as if her words held magic. Daniel, too, felt something stir in his heart. The hours passed quietly. Amara showed Eli the small garden behind her house where she grew a few vegetables. The garden was poor and half-wilted from lack of care, but Eli looked at it with wonder. "You grow food here?" he asked. "Yes," Amara said, smiling at the small plants. "It is not much, but it helps." Eli crouched down, touching a leaf carefully. "It's nice. My mom used to love plants," he said softly. Daniel's eyes darkened for a moment, but Amara did not ask. She only nodded gently, respecting the boy's memory. When they returned inside, Daniel was standing by the window, looking out at the muddy road. The storm had left puddles everywhere, but the sky was clear again. He knew he would have to leave soon, but a strange heaviness filled his chest. "Miss Amara," he said finally, turning to her, "I do not know how to thank you. You gave us shelter, food, and warmth when you had little yourself. Please, let me give you something in return." Amara quickly shook her head. "No, please don't. I did not help you for a reward. If I took money for every kind act, it would not be kindness anymore." Daniel was silent, surprised by her words. He was used to people expecting something from him, but this young woman was different. Eli, innocent and honest, suddenly said, "Papa, she is like an angel." Amara laughed softly. "I am no angel, Eli. I am just a girl trying to live." But Daniel looked at her seriously. "You may not call yourself one, but your heart is rare." Amara felt shy at his words and turned away, pretending to clean the table. The morning passed quickly, and soon a black car appeared in the distance. Daniel had managed to call a driver from his company once the signal returned. The car stopped outside the little house, its polished surface shining under the sun. Eli picked up his small bag, and Daniel stepped forward. "We must go now," he said gently. "But I will never forget this night." Amara walked them to the door. "Safe travels," she said, her smile warm but a little sad. "I am glad the storm brought you here." Daniel looked at her one last time, his eyes thoughtful. He wanted to say more but held back. Instead, he placed his hand over his heart and nodded. "We are in your debt." Amara shook her head. "There is no debt, just kindness." Eli waved cheerfully as he climbed into the car. "Goodbye, Amara." "Goodbye, Eli," she called, back, waving. The car drove away slowly, leaving a trail of dust behind. Amara stood at the doorway, her shawl fluttering in the wind. She did not know if she would ever see them again, but she felt strangely lighter inside. Little did she know, the man she had sheltered was no ordinary traveler. He was a man whose name carried power across the city. And though she had let him go, fate was already preparing a path that would bring them together once more. That morning, in her simple house, Amara returned to her routine, thinking life would go on as usual. But deep in her heart, a small spark had been lit, one that would soon grow into a fire she never expected. The night had been long, but inside Amara's small house, it carried a special kind of peace. The storm still roared outside, lightning flashing across the sky, but the little room glowed softly with candlelight. The sound of rain tapping on the roof mixed with the gentle voice of Amara as she spoke to Eli. She sat at the edge of the bed, telling him a simple story about stars that guided travelers home. Her voice was calm and warm, rising and falling like a soft song. Eli's eyes shone as he listened, even though his body was tired. His small fingers clutched the blanket while he smiled faintly at the tale. Daniel sat nearby, his arms folded across his chest. He watched his son's face, then turned his gaze toward Amara. He had not seen Eli smile so peacefully in a long time. For years, his work had kept him busy, and the weight of his responsibilities often left little room for gentle moments like this. Yet here, in this poor girl's home. His son looked happier than he had in weeks. "You tell stories very well," Daniel said quietly when Amara finished. Amara smiled modestly. "It was a story my mother used to tell me. I thought it might help Eli sleep." Daniel's eyes softened. "Thank you. He needs such kindness." Eli yawned and closed his eyes, drifting into sleep. Amara carefully pulled the blanket up to his shoulders. For a moment she watched him, her expression tender, almost as if he were her own younger brother. She had no family left, but caring for someone, even just for one night, made her heart feel full. Once Eli was asleep, Amara blew out the candle and sat back quietly. Only the storm's voice filled the silence. Daniel shifted slightly, his eyes still fixed on her. "You live here all alone?" he asked in a low voice. "Yes," Amara answered, her voice calm. "This is my home. It is small, but it is mine." Daniel nodded slowly, but his thoughts were heavy. He noticed the cracked ceiling, the worn furniture, and the patched walls. It was hard to imagine someone living in such conditions, yet Amara's face carried no bitterness. Instead, there was strength in her eyes, the kind that came from facing hardship without giving up. "You must have gone through much," Daniel said gently. Amara looked down at her hands. "Life has not been easy," she admitted. "I lost my parents when I was young. Since then, I have worked to survive. Some days are harder than others, but I try not to complain. Complaining does not make the day better." Daniel's chest tightened. Her words were simple, but they carried truth. He thought of the world he came from: big houses, shining offices, expensive dinners. Many people there complained about small troubles, but here was a young woman with nothing, and yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. "And you?" Amara asked gently, her eyes turning toward him. "What about your life?" Daniel hesitated. He was not used to speaking openly about himself, especially not to strangers, but something about her sincerity made him lower his guard. "My wife passed away some years ago," he said softly. "Since then, it has been just Eli and me. I try to give him everything, but sometimes I fear it is not enough." Amara's heart softened. She looked at Eli, sleeping peacefully, and then back at Daniel. "He is lucky," she said quietly. "Not because of things you can buy, but because he has you." "A child who has love is never truly poor." Daniel was silent, her words sinking deep into him. For years he had buried himself in work, believing wealth was the only way to secure his son's future. But in this small house, with this poor girl's simple wisdom, he felt a truth he had forgotten. The storm outside grew louder for a moment, thunder shaking the windows. Amara rose quickly and placed a small pot under a leak in the ceiling, catching the dripping water. Daniel watched her, surprised at how calmly she handled it. "You do this often?" he asked. Amara laughed softly. "Every time it rains. The roof is old, but I cannot afford to fix it. Still, the leaks do not scare me anymore. They remind me that nothing is perfect, but life still goes on." Her laugh was light, yet Daniel felt a pang in his heart. In her simple words, he heard courage stronger than many he had known in his rich world. The hours passed slowly. Daniel found himself talking more than he expected, about Eli's love for drawing, about the struggles of raising him alone, and about small memories of his wife. Amara listened without judgment, nodding gently, her eyes kind. In return, she shared small pieces of her own life: how she worked at the bakery, how she studied at night, and how she dreamed of one day becoming a teacher. Her dreams were simple, yet her voice carried hope. By the time the storm softened, a strange bond had formed in the little room. They were two people from very different worlds, yet in that night of rain and thunder, they found comfort in each other's presence. As the candle burned low, Daniel finally leaned back and closed his eyes, exhaustion overcoming him. Amara watched him for a moment, then pulled her shawl tighter and lay down on the floor again. The house was quiet except for the gentle breathing of the boy and his father. Amara closed her eyes, unaware that her small act of kindness had already changed something deep inside Daniel. Outside, the storm moved slowly away, leaving the world washed clean, and inside the poor little house, warmth had grown between strangers, a warmth that would not fade with the morning light. The morning sun touched the small house gently, as if it knew how fragile everything inside was. The storm had left puddles on the ground, but the sky was now clear and blue. Amara stood near the doorway, holding a small cloth as she dried the cups they had used for tea. She could hear Eli's laughter from outside, and it made her lips curl into a soft smile. Daniel was sitting on the old wooden chair, watching his son play in the muddy yard. For the first time in a long while, he felt a strange calmness. Eli's laughter was light, free, and innocent. It reminded him of days long gone, days when his wife was still alive, when their family felt whole. Amara noticed the quiet look on Daniel's face. It was not the silence of peace, but of memory, heavy with something unsaid. She placed the cloth aside and sat across from him. "You love your son very much," she said gently. Daniel looked at her, his eyes softening. "Yes, he is all I have left." There was a pause before he continued. His voice dropped lower, almost as if he was afraid of the words. "My wife. She passed away some years ago. Since then, life has been different. Eli was so small then, he barely remembers her. I promised myself I would raise him strong, but some days I wonder if I am doing enough." Amara listened quietly, her eyes filled with empathy, not pity. "It must be hard," she said softly, "to carry everything alone." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "It is harder than I imagined. People see me as strong, but inside I often feel tired. Sometimes I feel I am failing him." Amara looked outside at Eli, who was trying to catch raindrops from the leaves and laughing every time the water splashed. She shook her head gently. "You are not failing him. Look at his smile. A child's smile does not lie." Daniel turned his gaze back to Eli, and for a moment, the weight in his chest lightened. Her words felt simple, but they carried truth. After a moment, Amara spoke again, her voice soft, almost like a whisper. "I lost my parents when I was very young. They were everything to me. When they left, I thought my world had ended. But somehow, I survived. I learned to live alone, to work hard, and to hope." Her eyes grew distant, lost in memory. "There were nights when I cried quietly, wondering why life was so unfair. But then I realized, maybe pain is not only for breaking us. Maybe it is also for shaping us into who we are meant to be." Daniel watched her closely, surprised by the depth in her words. She looked so young, so fragile. Yet inside her was a strength far greater than many people he had known in his world of wealth. "Do you not feel lonely?" he asked. Amara smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed the truth. "Yes, many times. But I keep busy with work, with studies. I dream of becoming a teacher one day. That dream keeps me company when I am alone." Daniel felt a wave of respect for her. She had so little, yet she still held on to hope. She did not let her pain turn her bitter. Instead, she turned it into quiet strength. Eli came running back into the room, holding a small flower he had found near the garden. He ran to Amara and placed it in her hand. "For you," he said with a bright smile. Amara's heart melted. She bent down, kissed the top of his head gently, and said, "Thank you, Eli. This is more precious than gold." Daniel's chest tightened again. He was used to people praising his wealth, his power, his name. But this girl? She valued a flower. From a child more than riches. It was rare. It was beautiful. The three of them sat together for a while, sharing simple moments. Amara cut the remaining bread into small pieces so Eli could eat. Daniel tried to protest, knowing she had little left, but Amara insisted gently. "Food tastes sweeter when shared," she said, smiling. As Eli chewed happily, Daniel and Amara's eyes met for a moment. No words passed between them, but something unspoken grew in that silence, an understanding of two souls who knew what it meant to lose, to struggle, yet to still care deeply. Time moved quickly, and soon the sound of a car engine approached from the road. Daniel stood, recognizing it immediately. His driver had finally arrived. Eli's smile faded a little. "Are we leaving now, Papa?" Daniel nodded softly. "Yes, Eli. We must." Amara's heart sank quietly, though she kept her smile. "You will be safe now. The storm is over." Daniel looked at her, his eyes lingering longer than before. He wanted to say more, about how much her kindness had touched him, how rare her heart was, but the words stayed unspoken. Instead, he said, "Thank you, Amara, for everything. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us peace." Amara shook, her head gently. "I only did what any human should do," but Daniel knew better. Not everyone would have opened their door to strangers, shared their food, and given away their bed. What she had done was extraordinary, even if she did not see it that way. Eli hugged her tightly before leaving. "Goodbye, Amara. I will miss you." She hugged him back, her eyes moist, but her smile steady. "Goodbye, Eli. Be good and always smile." The car waited outside, its door open. Daniel placed his hand over his chest once more and gave her a small bow of respect. Then he and Eli stepped inside. The car rolled away slowly, leaving dust and silence behind. Amara stood in the doorway, holding the small flower Eli had given her. She pressed it to her heart and whispered, "Goodbye." The house felt emptier than before, but in her heart, there was also a strange warmth. She did not know if their paths would ever cross again. Yet deep inside, she felt that something had changed, not only in their lives, but in hers as well. The storm had passed, but its memory would stay forever, not because of fear or damage, but because it had brought strangers into her home and left behind a story that was only just beginning. The sound of birds filled the air as the morning sun rose higher. The storm was gone, and the sky stretched wide and bright, washed clean by the heavy rain of the night before. The little road outside Amara's house was still muddy, but the air felt fresh, carrying the smell of wet earth and blooming flowers. Inside the small house, Amara folded the thin blanket she had given Eli. She placed it neatly at the edge of her bed, then looked around the room. Everything was back in its place, yet the house felt strangely different. It was as if their presence had left a soft warmth in the air. Eli sat at the table, nibbling on the last piece of bread Amara had offered. His small legs swung back and forth under the chair as he ate, his eyes shining with the simple joy of being safe and cared for. Daniel stood by the window, his face serious but calm, watching the road. His driver would arrive soon. Amara poured a little more tea into Eli's cup. She had stretched the last of her tea leaves to make enough for them. "Drink, Eli," she said kindly. "It will keep you warm." "Thank you," Eli said with his sweet voice, holding the cup carefully in both hands. Daniel turned to Amara. "You have done so much for us," he said quietly. "You gave us food, shelter, and even your bed. I cannot leave without giving you something in return." Amara shook her head firmly. No, please don't. I did not do this for a reward. Daniel frowned slightly. But you must have needs. Look around you, Amara. Your house is broken, your table is empty, even the roof leaks. You could use help. She met his gaze calmly. Yes, I have needs, but I also have dignity. If I help someone only for money, then it is not kindness anymore. It becomes business, and kindness should never be for sale. Her words struck him deeply. He was used. To people asking, demanding, or expecting favors whenever he offered help. But here was a girl who had nothing, and yet she refused to take anything in return. Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment, humbled. "You are rare, Amara," he said softly. Amara only smiled faintly. "I am just a girl trying to live each day." A car horn sounded in the distance, breaking the silence. Eli looked up eagerly. Daniel's driver had finally arrived. Through the small window, Amara saw a sleek black car stop outside her little home. Its shiny surface looked out of place against the muddy road and the poor surroundings. Eli quickly stood up and grabbed his small bag. He ran to Amara and hugged her tightly. "Goodbye, Amara," he said, his voice filled with innocence. "I will miss you." Amara bent down, hugging him back. Her eyes grew moist, but she forced a smile. "Goodbye, Eli. Be kind, be strong, and always keep your smile. It makes the world brighter." Eli grinned, his face glowing, then ran to the door where his father waited. Daniel lingered for a moment longer. His eyes met Amara's, and there was a heaviness in them that words could not describe. He wanted to tell her who he truly was, to explain that he was not just a traveler, but a man who held power, wealth, and influence far beyond her imagination. Yet something stopped him. Perhaps it was the fear that she would look at him differently, or perhaps it was the quiet wish to hold on to the purity of her kindness, untouched by wealth. Instead, he placed his hand over his chest in a gesture of respect. "Thank you, Amara. You will always be remembered in my heart." Amara lowered, her head slightly, her smile gentle. "Safe journey, Daniel. May the road be kind to you both." Daniel turned, guiding Eli toward the car. The driver stepped out quickly to open the door. Eli climbed in with excitement, but Daniel paused before entering. For a brief moment, he looked back at the small house, the cracked walls, the girl, standing in the doorway with the morning light behind her. Something inside him whispered that this was not the end, only the beginning. The car engine roared to life, and soon it rolled down the muddy road, leaving dust and silence behind. Amara stood there, watching until it disappeared from view. Her shawl fluttered in the breeze, and her hands held the small flower Eli had given her the night before. When the car was gone, the quiet returned. The house seemed emptier, as if it had lost its warmth. Amara walked back inside slowly. She placed the little flower in a glass of water, setting it carefully on the table. It was a small thing, yet to her it felt like a treasure. She sat down, resting her hands in her lap. A strange ache filled her chest. She had known them for only one night, yet it felt as if they had been part of her life much longer. The laughter of Eli, the quiet strength of Daniel, the warmth of sharing even the smallest meal, it had all touched her deeply. Still, she reminded herself that life must go on. She had work at the bakery, studies to complete, and dreams to chase. She could not let her heart linger too long on strangers she might never see again. And yet, as she cleaned the table and swept the floor, her mind kept returning to them. She wondered if Eli was smiling in the car, if Daniel was still thinking about her words, if they would even remember her once they returned to their world. Amara sighed and looked at the flower again. "Maybe," she whispered to herself, Some meetings are not accidents. Maybe they are written by fate. Outside, the sun rose higher, spreading golden light across the land. Amara stepped out to begin her day, her shawl wrapped tightly around her. The world had not changed. Her house was still poor, her pockets still empty, but something inside her heart felt different. She had given kindness, and in return, she had received something unseen, a memory that would stay with her forever. What she did not know was that far away, in the car driving toward the city, Daniel and Eli were silent, their thoughts filled with her. Daniel's hand rested on the seat, his mind turning over the girl's words again and again. She gave us everything, he thought, when she had nothing. How can I forget her? The road stretched on, but in both their hearts, Amara's. Little house remained like a light, small yet bright, shining against the vast world. The city was alive with noise, tall buildings touching the sky, cars rushing on the wide roads, and people moving in every direction. Daniel sat inside his office, a large glass window behind him showing the shining skyline. Papers were on his desk. His phone kept ringing, and his managers waited for his orders. He was back in his world, the world of power, decisions, and endless work. But his mind was not in the city. It was still on the small broken house, the smell of tea, the sound of Eli's laughter, and the quiet dignity in Amara's eyes. Days had passed since that stormy night, yet the memory was as fresh as if it had happened only a moment ago. Daniel had met countless people in his life, business partners, wealthy leaders, people who wore expensive smiles but carried empty hearts. And yet, it was the poor girl with almost nothing who had touched him most deeply. Eli, too, had changed. Every night he spoke of Amara. "She told me to always smile, Papa," Eli said one evening as Daniel tucked him into bed. "She said it makes the world brighter. I want to see her again." Daniel listened quietly. The wish in his son's voice echoed the same wish in his own heart. Finally, one late evening, after finishing a long meeting, Daniel closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. His mind was restless. "I cannot just leave it like this," he whispered to himself. "She gave us shelter without asking anything. She deserves more than my silence." He stood up, made a decision, and called his driver. "Prepare the car tomorrow morning. We are going back to the village," he said, firmly. The next day, the black car once again drove along the muddy roads that stretched far from the city. The fields lay wide and green, farmers worked under the sun, and small children ran barefoot by the roadside. Daniel's heart beat faster the closer they got. Eli, sitting beside him, leaned against the window with excitement shining in his eyes. "Will she be happy to see us, Papa?" Eli asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes, Eli. She will be surprised, but I believe she will be happy." At last, the car stopped in front of the same small house. The walls were still cracked, the roof still broken in places, but smoke rose from the little chimney, and the door stood open as if welcoming them back. Amara was outside, kneeling by, a patch of earth where she had planted a few flowers. She wore her simple shawl, her hair tied neatly back. She looked up when she heard the car. Her eyes widened in shock as the black car came to a stop. For a moment she did not move. Then the door opened and Eli jumped out, running toward her. "Amara!" he shouted with joy, throwing his arms around her. Amara caught him, laughing softly. "Eli, what are you doing here?" Daniel stepped out slowly. He looked different now. Not the tired traveler of that stormy night, but a man dressed in a fine suit, his presence strong and commanding. Amara's eyes lingered on him with confusion. "Daniel," she said carefully, "why have you returned?" Daniel walked closer, his gaze steady. "Because I could not forget you, Amara. Because one night in your home changed something inside me, and because my son and I, we wanted to see you again." Amara lowered her eyes, her hands resting gently on Eli's shoulders. But I gave you only a little food and a place to stay. That is nothing special. Daniel shook his head firmly. It was everything. You gave without asking. You shared when you had so little. Do you know how rare that is in this world? People with plenty often forget kindness. But you, Amara, you remembered it even in your poverty. His words made her cheeks warm, though she tried to remain calm. She did not like praise. And yet something about the way he spoke made her heart beat faster. Eli tugged at her hand. Amara, can we stay here again? Please? Amara looked at the boy's hopeful eyes, and then at his father. A soft smile touched her lips. Of course, Eli. You are always welcome. They went inside together. Amara prepared tea again, just as before, though she worried her supplies were even less now. Daniel noticed her concern and quietly told Eli to go play outside for a moment. When the boy left, Daniel spoke in a lower voice. Amara, I cannot let you live like this. Your house is broken. You barely have enough food. Let me help you. Amara looked at him seriously. Daniel, I already told you. I cannot accept money as payment for kindness. I am not someone who sells her heart. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand, but what if it is not payment? What if it is friendship? What if it is respect? What if it is because I truly wish to see you live better? Her eyes searched his face, and for the first time she saw not just a stranger, but a man carrying a story much larger than she knew. She sensed that he was not telling her everything, yet his sincerity was clear. She sighed softly. If it is out of respect, not out of pity, then perhaps I can accept your help. Daniel smiled, relief in his eyes. Then it is decided. From today, you are not alone, Amara. I promise you that. Eli rushed back in, holding a wildflower he had picked. He placed it in Amara's hand with a big grin. Now you have 2 flowers, he said proudly. Amara looked at the little boy, then at his father, and for the first time in many years, she felt a strange warmth rising in her heart. It was not just kindness anymore. It was hope, and it was new. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky with gold and orange. Inside the small house, 3 lives sat together, sharing tea, sharing words, and slowly beginning to weave a bond that fate had written long before they realized it. What Amara did not yet know was that Daniel's true identity, the millionaire, CEO, was still hidden, and soon that truth would change everything. The sun rose slowly over the little village, spreading golden light across the fields and the small houses. Birds sang in the trees, and the morning air smelled sweet with fresh earth and blooming flowers. Inside her small home, Amara was busy, preparing breakfast. She moved quietly, her hands skillful, yet her heart felt heavier than usual. She could not stop thinking about the night before, when Daniel had returned with Eli, bringing warmth, kindness, and a feeling she had not known in a long time. Eli ran around the room, laughing, as he set the little table with the bread and tea. Amara, eat something too, he called. Amara smiled softly. Yes, Eli, but first, let me pour the tea. Daniel sat quietly in the corner, watching them. His eyes were gentle, but his thoughts were full of the truth he had kept hidden so far. He had waited for the right moment, and now he felt it was time. Amara, he began softly, there is something I need to tell you. Something important. She looked up from pouring the tea, curious. What is it, Daniel? He took a deep breath. I am not just a traveler or a man passing through your village. I am a businessman, the owner of a company that spans across the country. Some call me a millionaire CEO. Amara froze, the teapot trembling slightly in her hand. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she could not speak. She had known he was different somehow, carrying authority and quiet strength, but she had never Guess this, Daniel continued, his voice calm and sincere. I did not tell you before because I did not want my wealth or position to affect our meeting. I came to your home because of need. Yes, but also because I saw a heart that was pure, a kindness that is rare in this world. I wanted to know you for who you are, not for what you could gain from me. Amara set the teapot down carefully. She sat still, trying to understand. You are a millionaire? She whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, but wealth does not change what I feel. I came back because you and Eli became important to me. I want to help you, to make your life easier. But I also want you to know that I respect you. I do not want you to feel obligated because of money or power. Amara's mind raced. All the nights she had spent struggling alone, all the meals she had shared with strangers, all the kindness she had given without expecting anything. Suddenly, she realized the man she had helped was someone the world admired, someone people sought to impress. And yet, he had come to her humbly, just a father needing shelter for his son. Her heart softened. She looked at Daniel, then at Eli, who was drawing a small picture on a scrap of paper. Daniel, I don't know what to say, she admitted, quietly. I never expected. You do not need to say anything, Daniel interrupted gently. I only wanted you to know the truth. Everything else will follow naturally. I want your life to be better, not because I am rich, but because I care. Amara's lips curved into a small smile. I never thought someone like you would care so deeply about a stranger like me. It is unusual. Daniel reached out, his hand hesitating for just a moment before speaking. Amara, I respect your independence. I respect your dignity. But I want to walk beside you, if you will let me. Not as a savior, not as a wealthy man, but as someone who values your heart, your kindness, and your strength. Amara looked down at her hands, feeling her cheeks grow warm. She thought of the last few nights, the laughter of Eli, the quiet talks, the small acts of kindness. She thought of how her heart had grown heavier when they left, and how it felt lighter when they returned. Eli ran up to her, holding the drawing. Amara, I drew this for you. See? She took the paper, smiling at the colorful drawing of a little house under a bright sun. It is beautiful, Eli, she said softly, hugging him. Daniel watched the small moment between them and felt a sense of peace he had not felt in years. He had come back not only for Eli, but for Amara, and the warmth in the room told him that his choice had been right. Amara finally lifted her eyes to Daniel. You are different from anyone I have ever met, she said quietly. You came into my life when I needed it most, and you did not take advantage. You respected me even when you could have changed everything with just your money. Daniel smiled softly. Because respect cannot be bought. It can only be given and received. There was a long silence, filled with unspoken understanding. The bond that had grown over one night, strengthened by the return visit, had turned into something real, something neither could ignore. Amara took a deep breath. Daniel, I think I am ready to let you help me, not because I need money, but because I trust you, and because you care for us. Daniel's heart lifted. Thank you, Amara. That is all I could ever ask for. Outside, the sun rose, higher, shining through the small window and bathing the room in golden light. Inside, a new chapter was beginning, a story of kindness, trust, and love that had grown quietly from a stormy night into a lifetime of hope. Eli clapped his small hands. Can we stay together forever? He asked innocently. Amara laughed, tears in her eyes. Yes, Eli, forever. Daniel reached for her hand gently. And together we will face every storm, every challenge, and every new day. Together. Amara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her heart. The little house, the storm, the simple acts of kindness, all had led to this moment. And now, with trust, respect, and care, their lives would grow brighter, just like the sun outside. For Amara, Daniel, and Eli, the storm had passed, leaving behind something far more beautiful: love, hope, and the promise of new beginnings.